Salt of the Earth Farm Stories is proudly brought to you by Grig Media. Step into the world of farmers from diverse backgrounds across Australia. Through intimate interviews, host Darren Grigg delves into farming practices, traditions, and the challenges farmers face in nurturing the land.
20 years of work went up that race that day, and it was heartbreaking. Symbolically, as I shut the gate behind the furniture van, I unclipped my identity off myself and I hooked it on the front gate and left it with my farm, because that was me, and I felt like a failure.
Warren Davies, also known as the Unbreakable Farmer, has a powerful story to tell. He's raw, he's honest, and what he shares can be deeply moving. Warren was a kid in the city, but the country and farming was calling him. After working on a dairy farm, and at just 22, he bought his own property. But when his business partner, Mother Nature, threw a few curveballs, the pressure mounted. He hit rock bottom. His mental health took a massive hit. That moment became the catalyst for what he does today, sharing his story so others don't end up in the same spot. Yes, Warren walked off his land. He tried to leave agriculture behind, but it wouldn't let go. Now, he's on stages across Australia, building resilience in rural communities, getting people talking and empowering them to seek help. This is a truly inspiring story. Let's get into it. Good morning, Warren.
Good morning, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the Salt of the Earth podcast, mate. I've got to say, you look like a farmer.
Yeah.
You've been a farmer. You talk to farmers all day, but you grew up in the city, is that right?
I did. I started off in the city, till the age of 15. Grew up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. Mum and Dad were small business owners, so we had milk bars, post offices. Dad had taxi trucks, butcher shops, you name it. He used to give it a go. So grew up and so moved around a fair bit as a kid, but generally living in the back of a milk bar or a post office somewhere. It was just great way to grow up. Not good on the when you could still buy 2-cent cobbers and all that sort of stuff. So it was I used to score a lot of friends, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'll come home from school with you. How about a milkshake? So you'd get a milkshake. You'd go in the shop and make the milkshake and get them a bag of lollies, and then they'd piss off and you wouldn't see them again.
So were there moments as a kid that really shaped you to who you've become today?
Look, while I was growing up, I think probably there's lots of things that have shaped you, but a lot of it's in hindsight. I think when we look back, we think, well, that's why I'm like I am. And I think doing what I do now as a mental health speaker, a lot of what I now look back at and look at really defined a lot of the things that, or how that affects my behaviours and decision making, and that even as an adult. And it's something that I didn't, but probably some key things were I lost both my grandfathers when I was 7 within 4 months of each other, and they were my heroes, and so that was defining. But I talk about it, and no one really asks the question, growing up, and I talk about that in my presentations. But it was great. Like, I can still remember growing up, and I think I would have been 4 if I was lucky. Had a German Short-haired pointer dog. And I used to, now the Puff and Billy track goes right through Cockatoo, right up to Gembrook now. Used to stop at Emerald back in those days, and the old Puff and Billy track was just that, the old Puff and Billy track. And I used to take my dog, I can always remember, and she was a pointer, obviously, and she'd point the blue-tongued lizards for me, and I'd collect them. And so things like that, growing up as a kid, was great. And then once we moved to the Ferntree Gully, where I lived before we moved to the country, jumping on a train as a 10, 11, 12-year-old going, I'm a mad Richmond supporter, which we just talked about off air, going and, jumping on the train, going watching Richmond train and doing all those things. They were great times growing up in Melbourne. But there's a couple of things, obviously, in the background that kind of shaped who I am today, and they were revolved around being bullied at school and probably not quite fitting in. And
this is during your teenage years?
Yeah, so, and it probably not so much, it started really in grade 3. We moved from Cockatoo down into the eastern suburbs, into Ferntree Gully, and changed schools, and it was that probably really started then, where I felt that I didn't fit in, because I did kindergarten and started my schooling in Cockatoo. It's a small town at that stage. Cockatoo's now an outer suburb of Melbourne now, but so it was a really small community. You knew everybody. You start school, mum and dad are the postmaster and postmistress, so everyone knew who you were. And so moving to Ferntree Gully was a big change, and I didn't quite feel like I fitted in. And so it probably really started there, and I think that's where self-esteem and anxiety probably started developing. And when I say that, it's now in hindsight, because like when you're growing up as a kid, it's just something that you expect. That's just part of life, really.
So that knocked the confidence out of you. When you became, 18, 20, did you build some confidence and some resilience?
Look, I think moving to the country was the best thing going. I think, because I'd been subjected to this bullying, and I always talk about my 4 F's in life. My family's number one, and then my other 3 F's kind of revolve or change depending on the day and what context it is, but they revolve around facilitating what I do now as a speaker, farming, because I'm still very passionate advocate, and love being involved in the agricultural industry, and then footy's my other one. So growing up at this school in Melbourne is something that I never quite made, was the footy team. But moving to the country straight away, I'm playing senior footy at our local footy team as a 16-year-old, met a group of friends, everything started to evolve. But moving to a farm was a great thing for me, because we had friends when growing up in Melbourne who were farmers, friends in Gippsland, and then we had an uncle, mum's uncle was a dairy farmer in northern Victoria. And I always say my idea of what farming was all about slug guns, tractors, and motorbikes. Like that's what that's what farming was to me. It wasn't anything different. But obviously, once I started farming, my passion as a dairy farmer for dairy cows, and that all started to evolve from there.
So the farm life was calling you, and where did you go to first?
So it was 1982, 83, worst drought the Golden Valley had ever seen up until that stage. We lived in a beautiful brand new brick veneer home with concrete driveways in Ferntree Gully in a new estate, and moved to a little farm just out of Merrigum, which is between Kyabram and Shepparton. Moved into a house. It was a dust bowl, dry as dry. No concrete driveways, weatherboard house. If you laid in the corner of the lounge room floor, you used to roll to the other corner, needed re-stumping, all that sort of stuff. So for mum, it was a big change.
Yeah.
But dad wanted to be a dairy farmer, and as I said, it was a great way to escape Melbourne for me, and come to the city. So it was a little farm just out of Merrigum where, I think we only milked 40 cows or something. But back in those days, that was just a little hobby farm. Dad used to do a bit of butchering on the side as a relief butcher in town here in Kyabram for a couple of butcher shops, and that's how they made their way.
And at some point, you wanted to buy your own patch of dirt. How old were you then?
Yeah, so I moving to the country, I said, was great, but schooling kind of still didn't fit I'd kind of lost that passion for schooling. It would have been beat out of me, I think, when I started secondary school in Melbourne through the bullying. So I got here, and I'm 15, failing year 9, with a dream of becoming a park ranger, because I'd grown up in the national park in the Dandenongs. I'd grown up at the foot of the Dandenongs in Ferntree Gully, and been involved in the fire brigade and all that. Always wanted to be a park ranger, but failing year 9, that's never going to happen. So I got called into the office. Mum and Dad did. We've got to find a career for this kid. School's not for him, and that's when I chose farming. I thought, yeah, why not leave school? If Mum's willing for me to leave school, I'll leave.
At year 9?
Yeah, or it started year 10 it was. They put me up to year 10 out of sympathy, I think. And I left, not long into the year 10 year, I left school. Yeah, started full-time work on a farm as a 16-year-old. And as I said, that passion then was ignited and just grew and grew and grew until 22 was when I decided I knew everything. Knew everything about farming. So I worked on this farm with the best farmer in the district. He taught me everything I needed to know. So by the time I got to 22, I was a bit cocky. As I said, all the things that I'd kind of been missing in Melbourne fell into place. Playing footy, local footy team, met friends, girlfriend, the rest of the, life was great. So a lot of stuff had been brushed under the carpet basically. And I suppose way back then, or even before then, it formed this theme that's a repetitive theme through my story, and that's not doing anything about stuff when I should have. So I'm struggling with anxiety and low self-esteem, but life's got a lot better. At 22, thought I knew everything. He taught me everything I needed to know about farming. So I thought I want to go out on my own. I'd got the courage enough to ask my girlfriend to marry me. So at 22, she said yes. So I thought, beautiful, evidence is falling into place. So I looked at all my options and looked at leasing or share farming, and then nothing really ticked me box. And the thing that was really driving this, I suppose, is all my mates that I had that were on farms were all from generational farms. And, I'm at 16, 17, 18, they'd all gone back on the farm working with Dad, and I thought, geez, that looks good. I need to get out on my own, but obviously Dad had a small farm that wasn't going to be viable. But then they moved to Tongala, and right about this time, and then the farm next door to theirs that they'd bought come up for sale, so I bought that, and we joined the two farms together, and as that naive 22-year-old went into business with me mum and dad.
That's a bold move for a 22-year-old.
Look, I think it was just because, as I said, all my mates were, generational farmers. They were going back on the farm, and I'd really formed that passion for farming at that stage because, for cows and particularly farming, because the farm that we're on, it was just my boss and me, and, we did everything. Like, just thinking the other day of the skills that he taught me, and never, like now I know in farms that I've managed since, like you just get a flat tire, you ring the tire service up. No, not those days. Like I can remember spending, I reckon, a quarter of a day just trying to break a bead on a big tractor tire one day just so I could repair it, and then getting the old patch out and you set the match to it and she does the big fizz and all that. All those things that if you told some young bloke now, they wouldn't even know what that was, unless they worked in a tire service, obviously. But so he taught me all these things. So it was really great grounding, but it kind of probably didn't teach me everything that I needed to know about the farm. And so that I'd already formed that passion. So it was just the next step, I think.
Yeah. So your place that you had with your parents, that was dairy?
Yep, was the dairy farm.
Yeah. And was it just you on it then?
Yeah. So mum and dad and me and my wife, we'd just been married when we moved onto the farm. So we were actually living in town because there was only one house on the farm. We eventually built a house on the farm later on, but it was just us. And so starting off that, it was a bold move because we weren't milking enough cows. Business wasn't there big enough to sustain both families. So I did all what you'd normally do. I'd go out and cart hay during the summer for extra income, or work at the cannery, or do whatever. But with this burning desire that I wanted to pay off debt to buy more land, to get bigger, so then it was self-sustaining.
With dairy, there's no rest.
Definitely no. Okay, I see, because I'm lucky enough now I get to talk with, whether they're sugarcane growers in northern Queensland or they're, broadacre farmers in the west of Victoria or in Western Australia, and they all go, geez, that dairy farming, it's a tough gig, which it is. But you don't think about that when you're actually doing it, because it's just part of the job. You get up in the morning, you milk the cows, you do your jobs, you milk them at night, you go to bed, get up again.
Then in the early 2000s, there was a drought.
Yeah, so we faced a couple of challenges, and I often talk about my silent business partner, which was Mother Nature. She was the one that threw us the few curveballs along the way, and the first one was the first challenge that we ever faced was a flood, and that was
98, was it?
No, 93. That was a big flood, and so we got flooded. So that taught me, oh geez, Mother Nature's unrelenting here.
Yeah.
And then we did face a flood, but then in between the flood and the drought, we had a family bust up on the farm too, which was a bit of a trial, because, as I said, my 4S family's my number one, and I never went into business with mum and dad to actually have arguments with them. But we ended up having a complete relationship breakdown, which had a massive impact on me with my mental health because of that. but also, once again, that underlying theme to that story of not doing anything about it. Just, well, I've got to survive here. What do I do? So I bought him out of the farm and then set out on this 10-year plan of how to pay off debt and grow my business, what I had envisaged in my head, even though it was different to what mum and dad had. And we were flying and, ticking all the boxes, the 10-year plan, pay off debt, tick, buy more land, tick.
There's kids coming along at the same time?
They weren't in the plan, but they were coming along. We've got 5 kids, so they were,
nice.
so the first 3 would come along every 2 years, kind of, but this plan had all these boxes to tick off and we're ticking them off, and one of the things that I had built into that plan was drought. I expected to get drought. I was, after learning the lessons from the flood and realising that Mother Nature's unrelenting, I had drought but built into my plan. But as an irrigated dairy farmer from Northern Victoria, security was what's why everyone come here. That's why a lot of Gippslanders come over the hills and bought farms here and that, because of the security. But as that drought moved past 3 years and into the 4th, 5th and 6th year, it started to get pretty tight. And I suppose we were starting, as a couple, as a farming couple, but me particularly, I was starting to, really feel the strain emotionally, physically, because we were hand feeding stock for a fair bit and, working harder. One of the things that I did, silly, stupid of me, to try and outsmart Mother Nature, I worked harder and harder to try and outsmart her, and that was never going to work.
Yeah.
By the time we moved into that 6th year of the drought, we were, and particularly me, physically, emotionally and financially broken, I suppose.
Yeah, 5 kids, a mortgage and a drought, and Mother Nature not going your way. It's going to have taken its toll, mate. So what happened then, mate? Did you stay around the land, or did you have to see a sign? And
look, and I think it was that wasn't the catalyst, but my failing mental health was one of the challenges that, I was really spiraling out of control. But
did you recognise this?
No, I didn't at the time. In hindsight, there's so many signs that, but I was frustrated, I was sad, I was angry, all the emotions that you could show. Or if you're looking out for someone with mental health challenges, they're the things that you look for. I was isolating myself, stopped doing the stuff that I loved doing, all these classic signs. And that really got me into a really spiral where I really hit rock bottom. And
still trying to milk cows at the same time.
Still trying to milk cows. And it's kind of one of the things that I try to explain to someone. When someone doesn't understand mental illness, it's really hard to explain it to them. But the best way I can explain it, that someone might conceptualize the idea, is that I was like a high functioning alcoholic. I was falling apart, but yet I could still do my job and could focus fully on that job. But there was a lot of quiet moments where the world was falling apart, and hit rock bottom, and that was a really dark, scary place, which probably the catalyst to doing what I do now, as in sharing my story and stuff, because I don't want anyone else to get to that spot. And it's a big, hairy goal to chase, but that's why I do it. But I think the biggest challenge that I faced was when I did see the writing on the wall and know that my farming journey was finished, as such, as Warren the farmer on my own farm. We decided to leave the farm. We couldn't sell it, so we just walked off. That was a big decision with, as you said, with a heap of kids in tow and a wife. And so, all this stuff that goes around, particularly when you're a bloke. I was a farmer, one, and then I'm a bloke as well. So I'm tarred with the brush twice, feeling a sense of guilt and shame of what, what I've put my family through for the last 6 years, trying to chase this dream in conditions that shouldn't have been chasing. Because, we were highly geared financially, that was just our situation. The drought was really tough. So that was hard. So
it's your identity too, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and that's where it led to when we did walk off the farm. The toughest day was the day that I sold my cows, because it was in the middle of the drought. So we sold a few of the autumn cows to the Western District. I think they went about 40 of them. The rest of them all went on a truck 2 k's around the road to Greenham's, and probably within a couple of hours, though, there was no coming back from that. And even if I wanted to change my mind, there wasn't. So that was, 20 years of work went up that race that day, and it was heartbreaking. But then leaving the farm, I always say, symbolically, as I shut the gate behind the furniture van, I unclipped my identity off myself and I hooked it on the front gate and left it with my farm, because that was me.
Yeah.
And I felt like a failure when I left that farm, and I was actually going to do a job to be a farmer. So we went to South Australia and I managed a farm down there, which I suppose when you saw it on paper, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Every second weekend off, and that's a 3-day weekend you have off, and you're living 5 miles from the Southern Ocean. There's beaches and this, that, and the other. I thought this will be a dream.
Completely different farming operation.
Yeah, it was big. It was 1,200 cows, rotary dairy, staff, all that stuff. And so it was the greatest learning experience, but it was meant to be this saviour, and it wasn't. It was actually totally the opposite for us. And we ended up coming back home here. We started in Tongala, but here to Kyabram, because it was a nightmare job. First 6 months, I don't think I had a day off, and it was long hours and there's a lot of stuff going on. So for us moving there as this saviour and healing place, doing the stuff that I love doing, even though the drought had kicked me in the backside, it was like this was going to be, the saviour job, and ended up being quite the opposite. So we ended up moving back home again, and kind of even lost more identity, because then, and it all stems back. I go back in my story from that moment when I moved from Cockatoo into Furniture Gully, and the day that I started there, I got asked to do a maths sum on the blackboard at school, and I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. And I can still remember standing up there. The teacher asked me up the front straight away, and the best way to explain it was like there was kids at the back of the room piffing seeds at me, and they were planting themselves in the back of my head. And every now and again, with my mental health challenges, they germinate every now and again. And at this time, when we left Mount Gambier and come back home, those seeds were well and truly germinated then. And so I felt like a failure again, couldn't even stay at that job. But totally in hindsight, you can rationalise things a lot better. And it was a knee-jerk reaction, because we'd come from 6 years of drought to it was like heaven to milk cows in Mount Gambier. Like, grass is up to your calf muscles every day of the week, and it's just beautiful. But the whole situation, if I had a break, I think between then it might have worked, but it was going from out of the pan into the fire kind of thing. And it was, pretty full on job and no rest and young family. And it was just probably not what I needed at that stage. I needed to rest and recuperate probably a little bit.
And those seeds that would keep popping out the back of your head, thinking you're a failure here, you've let the family down, you've let your community down, but really that's just your perception, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it is. And I think, I know I'm not now. I still say I've still got to give them a touch of Roundup every now and again, because they do, you have a tough week and then you go, geez, am I really this, and like the same thing last week or so, I spoke down in Melbourne on the steps of Parliament at a rally, and I'm driving to Melbourne going, these people aren't going to listen to me. And they're those seeds starting to sprout. What the hell are you going here for, Warren? Yeah. There's nothing you can say here that's going to change this, but you do it anyway.
Well, they do listen, mate. I've seen you on national media, so it's
you do get up and turn up and do that stuff, but that doesn't mean that those seeds weren't germinating on the trip down to Melbourne, saying, well, what the hell are you doing? And that's something that I have to really work hard at. I'm comfortable sitting here chatting with you today. I feel like I know you. I've listened to all your podcasts, so
thank you.
So I feel I do enough driving that I've caught up. So keep bringing them out. But I feel like I know, so I feel comfortable. But when you stand in front of a couple of thousand people in Spring Street in Melbourne, it's, oh, geez, I don't know about this. And then, a couple of the people that are speaking before you are, they're really fired up, and you're getting up there to talk about mental health and the impacts that this is having. Like it was, what are you doing? And they're those seeds, and I've recognised them really, like, not recently. I've known they're there, but I've realised the impact that they have, and that's the best way to describe how it is they're still there, and they're from way back then. And I think that's what the greatest lesson, that we need to know, that there's things that can impact our behaviours and the way we deal with stuff, and it mightn't be from here and now. It could have been something there, and it might be quite insignificant, but it impacts how you deal with stuff now. And that's something that I've come to realise around my own mental illness.
So after Mount Gambier, you came back here. What was next?
Oh dear. So I think I got a bit of a dad's trait, like try anything. So I come back here, we sat for a little bit. I did a bit of relief milking, but decided for someone who's not the sharpest tool in the shed and hates maths, I'll become a finance broker.
Good one.
So I did a course. I'd been watching some wealth creation kind of videos and stuff, and I ended up resonating with this guy. He's a good mate today. So, Adam, if you're listening, I've seen him on this, and he's all of a sudden he's running become a finance broker courses up a Maroochydore, and I'm thinking, geez, this would be good, move to the Sunshine Coast, and end up becoming a broker with them, did the course and become a broker with them based here in Victoria, spent a bit of time up there, and then helped roll out their national franchise and did all that. So it was a great experience. So everything that I've done post my farm has all added to where I am today.
It's sounding good to me. You're not getting the 5 o'clock starts. You're not in your gumboots walking around in cow manure all day.
Yeah, but sometimes I miss that. That's I always, but so I did that, but worked out pretty quickly that, or as I jokingly say, I like having a bit of light and shade in my presentation. My kids got sick eating baked beans, so I wasn't a good finance broker, so I went straight back into farming. So basically, I just kept trying to break away from agriculture, but agriculture kept pulling me back. So I ended up managing a farm just out the road from Kyabram here. Ironically, the guy who ran the farm was probably one of the best dairy farmers in the district as well. And today he's my daughter-in-law's grandfather. So it's really one of those Kyabram small town moments. But yeah, so I got a job there. I love that. I was there for a few years and still had these itchy feet that it wasn't quite me, because it's not my farm. I'd been my own boss for 20 years. And I thought, I'm never going to get my own farm again. I'll go and do something different. So I ended up going and working in real estate for 3 years as a dairy specialist selling farms. And I think that was the bit that really, I suppose, pulled all together what I'd done, the finance broking, the dairy farming, managing people in managing farms and doing all that sort of stuff. And then, because I'd be sitting down just like you and I are here. I'd go to a farm, and basically all we'd be discussing is the 3 Ds in life: death, divorce, or drought. And I'd be trying to help them navigate their journey about selling their farm. At least they weren't walking off their farm, but I was thinking, how can I use my story to be able to help others navigate this journey? And particularly when it's something that there's a lot of guilt and shame based to it, especially if you're a generational farmer and you're the one that's 5th generation and you're deciding that you're selling the farm. How can I use my story to try and help? And that probably started planting those seeds again of how can I do that? But I never had even the self-confidence to do anything like that. So I went back managing a farm again. So actually during the real estate, I ended up selling some river country to a farm. They were doing some carbon crediting and I sold them some land, and then they got me to come on board as a manager, and that's what I did, and did that for a little bit, and then tried some other stuff as well. A lot of stuff that, just when I look back and think, why did you say yes to that? And why? But you did. And it all ends up, because then there was a bit of a split of that business, and they started up another farm which had some Chinese investment. So I set that farm up for them, and then that wasn't quite what it was meant to be as well. I think I've always said that when I was getting bullied at school. It's like I've got a neon sign on my forehead saying, he's the easy target. Look, well, let's go for him. So similar in business a little bit. So I'm a bit more wary these days about who and what I talk to. And so I did that, and then left that, And that's about when the speaking stuff started too. I started doing the course, and I just did that as I've got nothing else to lose really. But at the same time, I'd got another job managing another farm, so I was doing that at the same time.
At the same time as this course?
Yeah.
And what was the course called?
It was just a speaker course, it was run by an entrepreneur. We'd been talking about self-development courses for a while, but as once again, using that light and shade, none of the self-development courses kind of appealed to me because they all required that you rappelled off a skyscraper in Melbourne, and I don't need that more sort of self-development. So I never said yes. But he's an international speaker himself, and he said, I've got this speaker course. And it was something, and I said to him no at the start, to flatly no, because as you've heard through my schooling, it wasn't something I was going to do, stand up in front of a group of people. My only foray actually into public speaking was being a footy coach, and my players never listened to a bloody thing I had to say. I could rant and rave at 3/4 time, tell them the best frigging story. I could go blue in the face, and they'd just go out and do what they wanted to do. They never listened to anything I said. So public speaking wasn't on my radar. But he said something to me that really intrigued me, and as I said, I had nothing really else to lose. I could fit this course in. It was 6 months long. It was all online, had 3 face-to-face sessions. I'll be able to handle that. But he said to me on the phone, and that was either his sales pitch or whatever, he goes, you've got a story, and who are you not to share it?
Yeah.
And that's probably hence why we both do podcasts.
Yeah.
Because, people have got stories, and who aren't they? Who are we to stop them from sharing it and give them a platform to share those stories? So he said that to me, and I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to do that. Yeah, I haven't looked back from there, but I was still managing farms, and I was doing stupid stuff like milking. I was managing a 3,500 cow farm.
Really?
And I'm still doing so I'd do a 12-hour shift on that farm, then jump in the car and drive to the other side of the state to do a presentation at a football club on a Thursday night, and then come back and milk the cows in the morning. And so at some stage it had to give, and I either stayed with agriculture because the job that I was doing was a 3,500 cow farm.
That's a big dairy.
Yeah, 24/7 operation. Yeah. Or I say no, and I'll pursue this speaking course. But at that stage, I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And even to be honest with you, when I was doing the course, never ever thought that was going to lead to what I do now, not in a million years.
So now you're a keynote speaker on stage, helping rural communities build resilience. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I first started, I touted myself as a resilience expert because obviously been knocked down and got myself up a few times, and through farming and that journey. I touted myself because at the start I never dreamt about talking about mental health, and particularly my story. It wasn't something that was ever on the radar. So it was based around 3 words. And like I said, those seeds are in my back of my head. I was driving to Melbourne to the first face-to-face session of this course, and I pulled over at Seymour and said, what the hell are you doing here, Warren? What are you driving to Melbourne to do a speaker course? You are absolute fool. Turn around, go home. That's what my inner dialogue was telling me. It's something that I really struggle with, and that comes from these seeds germinating that inner dialogue. I was going to turn around, but the other part of me is really loyal. So if I want to do something and I say I'm going to do it, I'll generally do it. So I kept driving, but by the time I got a little bit further down the road, 3 words popped into my head, which formed the basis of what I talked about for probably the first 18 months. And that was resilience, persistence, and determination. The 3 words that encapsulated my farming journey, not anything about mental health. It was all about getting knocked down and standing back up again. Some people tout me as a leader, so I talked a bit about leadership stuff. But I'd also got this gig doing some, as I said, working for a foundation, doing some gigs at the footy clubs on Tuesday and Thursday nights around mental health, which ticked off those 4 things. Footy, one of my passions, facilitating, and so it was ticking all these things off, and I was loving that. By facilitating that program, I got the opportunity just to share a little bit about me, and then one night just popped out a bit about mental health and a bit about really struggling and spiraling out of control, and then I've got people come up and hugging you, and then you got people ringing you the next week, and I thought,
it was a light bulb moment, was it?
Yeah, I might share a little bit more about this. And bug me dead now, I'm a mental health speaker,
Yeah.
talking a little bit about resilience and leadership, but it's generally, and it's so amazing once you start exploring it or how it's all interlinked. And, you know, so I can do a leadership presentation, which has got a lot of mental health stuff in it, because it's part and parcel, it's all hand in glove sort of stuff.
It's a fascinating story, mate. And so who do you talk to? What sort of groups? It's not just farmers, is it?
No. Well, at the start, it was footy clubs and obviously rural footy clubs. So my focus now, I've got a 3-part mission that I focus on now, which is around creating awareness and education around mental health and wellbeing, but particularly in rural communities, because it's where I come from. I understand that, which encompasses lots of people now, because it's industry, it's, you know, it's not just farmers, it's industry, it's community. I don't tout myself as a gender-based mental health speaker, like I'm not a men's mental health speaker, I'm a community mental health speaker. So the first part of that mission is creating that awareness and education. The second part's about inspiring conversations. Coming back to that, who am I not to tell my story?
Yeah.
But I'm a great believer, by me telling my story then gives you and others permission to share your story. So that's the second part, and that's really should be really the first part now. Over the last 15 to 18 months, I've realised there's a lot of education and awareness. We still don't talk about it. So we need to inspire those conversations. And then thirdly, it's about empowering people to seek help in a safe environment, that if you are feeling that you need help, that you've got the courage to stick your hand up and you don't feel any shame and guilt about that. So that's my mission. But then that's led me into so many things. Like, as I said, started off with just talking about my farming journey, about resilience, persistence, determination. Now share more about my mental health journey, but then that led me into the disaster recovery space. So over the last 6 years, I've worked in every community, particularly in the northern rivers of New South Wales, Gippsland and the northeast of Victoria after the bushfires, but the floods in Lismore, like working in places like Lismore and Corryong and Bairnsdale and places like that. It's I felt I've been working fairly heavily in that disaster recovery space, and now obviously again we're back to drought. So over my speaking career, we've had drought, bushfire, flood. We're back to drought again, and you know, travelling all around the place at the moment, doing drought talks in, you know, South Australia and Western Victoria at the moment, and going up to Charleville up in Queensland in the next couple of next month or so to go and do some talks up there as well. So so it's kind of it's amazing how it has evolved, and I still don't understand it. I just get up and do it. Like,
well, I believe that too. You're quite raw and upfront, and you say how it is. That can be a bit confronting for some people.
Yeah, and I make and as I said, my it's not a goal, but it's a part of the light and shade as well. I've got a goal tonight, and it's to make you laugh, make you cry, and make you think.
Yeah.
And if I can achieve those 3 things, I've done a good job.
Yeah.
You know, so I always, you know, the joke. So even my joke starts at, you know, a bit of lightheartedness starts at the start, you know, of my presentations, where I tell people this is going to be challenging. I'm telling my life story. It's my story, my lived experience, not yours. Some of it's confronting, and you will resonate with lots of it. And if you do feel triggered, feel free. You can leave the room. But I just ask you to give me a thumbs down, like as you leave, so I can make sure you're supported. But to put a bit of light to that, I always say, well, if you're just leaving the room because you're sick of listening to me, give me a thumbs up. And then I'll adapt my presentation to make sure you're included for the rest of it, you know, just as a bit of a joke. So, you know, trying to keep that light and shade in a pretty tough subject, particularly when you're working in, you know, and I don't know if you've been to Lismore, but Lismore is one of those places that you know what's happened there. Like, it's like you walk around like someone holding you on the top of the shoulders, pushing you down. It's a really heavy place, particularly early on it was. So when you're working in communities like that, it's pretty raw. So some of the stuff that is confronting and it is triggering, but I think that creates a vulnerable space then by sharing that story for others to go, well, shit, that's how I feel. I'm going to stick my hand up here. I need some help. And I think that's the important part. It's inspiring them conversations.
Well, that's where we'll wrap up part A of our conversation with Warren. Warren's honesty and resilience are powerful reminders of what so many in our rural communities face and overcome. But we're not done yet. In Part B, we dive deeper into Warren's story and hear about the tools he uses to manage fear, stay grounded, and support others. It's a thought-provoking and timely conversation, especially with the challenges many farmers are facing right now. Stick around for Part B. And please share this episode and follow us on social media. Search Salt of the Earth Farm Stories.